Good evening, everyone across the nation and across the sea and all that kind of stuff. It is your Big Gold Belt Wrestling Podcast, and we have a lot to get into tonight. A mixed bag of material, so to speak, because Mr. McMahon has arrived on Netflix, years in the making, so we'll get into that. AEW Grand Slam comes to New York for is the fourth year? Fourth year. Fourth year in a row. We will talk about AEW Grand Slam, and next week, NXT comes to the CW. Things that have been months and years in the making, folks. We're going to get into all of it tonight. Get ready, folks. Your Big Gold Belt Wrestling Podcast starts right now.
Big Gold Belt, 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 Big Gold Belt. All I really want is that Big Gold Belt, 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 Big Gold Belt. All I really need, that Big Gold Belt.
Thank you so much for being with us here tonight. I am Will with the Big Gold Belt Wrestling Podcast. To my left in the Lone Star State is Damian G, and to my right is the Giant Crab Jamal. Gentlemen, how are we doing as we're almost to the end of September and is the first week of fall? We have gotten out of the summer somehow, one way or another.
You haven't gotten out of summer. I'm still here. I am we had 92 degrees today, which is a cold front for here in Texas. So yes.
That sounds horrible.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for this hurricane to do something.
That is true. Any folks are watching that are down in the Florida area, we are thinking of you because we, as that is barreling up the coast and getting ready. It's gonna be an interesting weekend as far as that goes. I think we'll all be keeping our eye on that. TNA already moved their tapings, I heard, up to South Carolina.
Oh wow.
For the weekend. I guess they were going to be taping somewhere down there, and they're like, nope, we're not chancing that. So found a place in, I think, Spartansburg that they're going to be running instead, from what I saw. So folks are making moves already to not deal with that hurricane. So stay safe, please, if you are in possibly the path of that coming through. But we have plenty of stuff to talk about tonight, folks. This is going to be an interesting show. Stuff that we've been like kind of waiting to happen for a while finally happened this week in a couple different forms. So we're going to start right at the top with the one that's had the longest wait. This has been years in the making. I mean, this goes back to before COVID even, when this first started getting rumblings of this happening. Netflix's docu-series on Vince McMahon titled Mr. McMahon dropped Wednesday, 2 days ago. No, just over 24 hours ago. 3 a.m. Wednesday that it went up on the East Coast. So it came up. Of course, you had crazy folks that were waiting for that thing to drop and like watched it all. By the time I was up that morning, there were folks who had watched the whole thing, all 6 episodes, and like that full things up about it, had that thing all broken up, and I was like, okay, I'm not that darn crazy. So I didn't have that kind of motivation, but the takes were flying as soon as I was up on Wednesday morning about this thing. So a quick little overview. It is 6 episodes in length. They're each about an hour, some a little shorter, some a little longer. So you're looking at 6 hours of Mr. McMahon on Netflix. And there's a lot of different opinions flying around about this. I've managed to watch the whole thing between the last 2 days. I broke it up, knocked out 4 of them yesterday and 2 of them today. And I watched them in a very specific order that we'll get into, but it really doesn't matter in that respect what order you watch it, I don't think, because they're very self-contained. Okay. But it is interesting. Before I go any further, have either of you seen any of it yet?
Not yet.
Not Damien.
I don't have Netflix, so I'm good on that.
There you go. I think it is a Netflix deal, so with their production. So I will say this to start. Production-wise, it's very clearly they spent a lot of money on this thing and a lot of time. All these years that we're talking about that were put into this thing. It is very well produced. It looks very polished. It's got real music in it and everything. Like, heck, you even get the old WWF logo. They talk about the WWF since it's an independent, not WWE production. They could do all that. All the old logos are in there. When they're showing Hogan in the 80s, he's coming out to Eye of the Tiger. It's like, there's stuff like that where it's like, oh, okay, this is definitely a little different than what we're used to.
Right.
In some ways, I would describe it as one of the A&E biography specials, but with a much bigger budget and obviously a lot more time put behind it. is what I would say. Now, that said, I would say the first reaction I was seeing when I woke up on Wednesday morning was a ton of people being like, there's nothing in here that ain't anything new. This is the same old crap that I've heard for years. And so I went into it hearing that. Here's how I approached it. I watched the first episode first to get like just an idea, because I wanted to get a feel for it. I wanted to get an idea of what it looked like, how they produced it and everything. So I watched the first one. And at the end of the first one, I was like, all right, I'm going to jump to the end. Because my number one question was, how are they going to handle all the current drama with everything, with all the legal stuff and all that? So I jumped to the end to see how they would handle that. And then I was like, okay, then I'll watch the middle, is what I ended up doing. But between the first and the end, it's definitely, I'm trying to think how to put this. I'm not going to say it's not bad. There's a lot of people saying it outright, just it's no good. They didn't question anything and all this. It's very thorough in the respect that any random like Vince McMahon drama that I could think of from over the years, all 30 plus years of watching wrestling all the way back to the 80s and all that, it's all in there. This is definitely no puff piece where they're like, oh, we're not going to talk about that. We're not going to talk about steroids. We're not going to talk about ring boys or any of that. We're not going to talk about he who must not be named. No, that's all in there. It's all in there, warts and all. What the issue I think some people are taking with it seems to be is that it's all in there, but there's no like really pushing back at Vince on anything on it, where essentially it's like, this happened. He kind of gets to be like, well, I did A because I did A, the WWE narrative we've always heard about different things. Brett screwed Brett, for example.
Right.
And then in other cases, just kind of like, oh, I don't know about that. And then just move on, next thing, God, I'm not sure from what I'm saying here, any initial reactions of what I'm throwing out here so far?
Nothing surprises me about anything you've said. Not a damn thing. This is par for the course. When you describe it as like bigger and like logos and music and fanfare,
right?
That is a old school WWF way back when production of glitz and glamour. So what you're describing, eventually I will see it, smells like the 80s. So not surprised by anything you're telling me right now.
Yeah, I mean, they hit all the obvious stuff. They start with like his childhood, the early WrestleManias, buying the company from his dad, the Hogan era. Then we go into like, the Montreal screw job and all that, the Monday Night Wars, all the real obvious stuff that you would expect. It's all in. It's all in there. So in a lot of ways, it's very, I guess a lot of people would say it's repetitive. But I think the key thing that people are missing with all this is, with this being on Netflix and, prominently featured, on the front page of Netflix and everything, this is being aimed at a very general audience that might not know, one damn thing about this. And with the respect of looking at it as something is aimed for a general audience, in a lot of ways, I think they did a hell of a job with it because they cover so much ground. But that said, if you're not a wrestling fan, if this is general audience, looking at this, does a general audience really want to watch 6 hours of Vince McMahon? It is a huge runtime. It's a big.
So then based on that, then what's the angle? Like, what's the hook that would keep you there for 6+ hours if you're not a wrestling fan? Because it seems like they're landed somewhere in the middle. If this is the thing that's the next big thing that you got to binge on Netflix because the algorithm said compels you to do so, all right, cool. But if you're a wrestling fan and you've been waiting for this and it's not going to get into the salacious, meaty details that the dirt sheets can't fill in the blanks for, then all right, cool. So it seems to be somewhere in the middle, but what's like the narrative that they're trying to portray?
Right.
Yeah. Where it gets weird is here's the weird part. But when it opens up from the very beginning, this is where when people are being like, well, it didn't get into, a lot. It didn't say anything I didn't know about. They kind of tell you from the beginning that that's going to be the case, because one of the very first moments in the thing is Vince sitting down to be interviewed and the producers are talking to him. And he's kind of like, oh, the things I can't tell you guys. And they're kind of like, well, what? Huh? But that's kind of what we're here for. And he's like, oh, you ain't getting anything out of me. Like from the bat, he's talking about that there's stuff he will not go into, stuff he is not going to talk about. And it's like right off the bat, they show you that. So they kind of tell you from the jump that there's going to, and he also goes into the idea of like, people don't know who I am. They think they do, but they don't. There's a lot of the point of the documentary, a lot of the angle of the documentary is supposed to be Mr. McMahon versus the true person behind it, Vince versus the character of Mr. McMahon. And then during the thing, he'll be talking about, well, people don't know who I am and all this, and it's because I don't want anyone to know who I am. So it's kind of like there's a stalemate in this thing of it's supposed to be a documentary. You want it to be like a tell-all thing, but you ain't giving. You're not putting.
Yeah, giving us anything.
There. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You can't have it both ways. So,
but
it's weird in that respect.
But that's kind of what you'd expect, right? I mean, why would Vince McMahon open himself up to dozens of hours of footage and tapings, basically confessing his sins to Netflix?
Right.
Like, what's in it for him to do that?
And that's the other thing. Of course, this was all done. They tell the other thing they put up from the beginning. At the beginning they have graphics and stuff talking about all the current drama, the sale, the legal entanglements he's in, the Janelle Grant stuff, and all that. They mention all that, and then they're very quick to say, pretty much this entire production is from 2022 and before. So they're like, any interview you're seeing, anything in this, anyone, all the talking heads about him, all the wrestlers talking about him, it's all from before that. So it's like, they're very clear that when I got to the end of it, and I'll tell you this. So the last episode, the reason I jumped to the end, because like I said, I wanted to see how they would handle the current stuff. So I get to the end. The last episode starts with the Benoit stuff, and then gets through all that. They cover all that stuff. They cover kind of the end of the Ruthless Aggression era. And then it goes into this whole thing about what's Vince's legacy going to be. And they have everyone Trish Stratus, Undertaker, John Cena, Stone Cold, kind of go around, what's his legacy? What's his legacy? And it comes across like that was going to be the end of the documentary. They were wrapping everything up. That was going to be the final thing. And then all this crap happened. Wall Street Journal drops the article. Lawsuits start happening. They got to sell and all this. And then all of a sudden they're like, uh-oh. We got to tack an extra 25 minutes on this to talk about that.
Right.
It's really oddly done where it very much feels like the documentary's finished. And it's like, we got to add something to this. And it's only 25 extra minutes of stuff dealing with the current situation. It's very
so then that's just a bit of bad luck that breaking news broke after they finished production.
That's how it comes across. That's how it comes across. Because there's, like I said, you get to the end and all of a sudden it's like, and then they'd say, they had more interviews scheduled with him. And of course, once all that shit started, he's like, nope, not talking now. So it's weird in that respect. There's very odd stuff like that. But I get the idea that, hey, legal shit's happening. All this is ongoing to this day. Clearly they can't talk about that. No one's going to go on the record about ongoing, investigations and stuff other than reporters. The people from the Wall Street Journal talking about it, but no one from the company is going to talk about that. So I get all that. I think a lot of people wanted that, but there was never a chance that's what this was going to be. I mean, it can't be when it's all ongoing.
Yeah, I mean,
this isn't. Go ahead. Sorry, Craig.
Yeah, I mean, that's why it's a bit surprising because, we talked about last week and how Vince was like, he tried to buy the series and bury it, so and all this other stuff. And I'm not really hearing anything in it that would make me want. Why would he be so paranoid then?
My theory is it's because it's on Netflix, because it's going to be so readily available. Because it's not that the stories are new. The steroid scandal, the Ring Boy scandal, Jimmy Snuka, all the random shit, Chris Benoit, you name it, all the wrestlers dying in the 2000s. All that stuff's known. It's all been out there before. I think the issue for him is it being on Netflix, it being readily accessible to folks where it's digging all this up again in a very easy to get, in a very mainstream place. I think that's his issue with it. It's not that the content, it's the availability and it being distributed in this manner. How they just did that McMahon doc on Vice, Dark Side of the Ring deal, and he didn't care about that. I get that because I thought that was buried on Vice. This is Netflix. It's much more front and center.
Also because WWE is going to be on Netflix. So that's another reason.
Right.
That's
and that was our
because
question, our question going into this was like, how are they gonna walk that line of we're putting out this doc that's gonna put all this stuff about Vince on it, but yet come January, we're the home of everything WWE here on Netflix. And it very much came across like they did the deal where it's like, a lot of people have been saying lately, bad man gone. It's just, well, he don't work there anymore. So that's not our problem. It's we're in business with WWE. We're not in business with Vince McMahon, is how it came across at the end.
And I was going to say that I'm surprised how you're describing it. It didn't end with like a black screen with title and saying all that about the Janelle Grant thing, and he's no longer affiliated. Like they do with certain movies, like he was still missing at the end.
A lot of those title screens at the end of each episode, very talking about what happened with various litigation, whether it was Owen Hart, or different stuff like that. And they do put something up at the end about how there's currently federal investigation, Janelle Grant stuff is ongoing, blah blah blah. Vince resigned, and it's in there. But and actually, that's one thing that I did see people pointing out. They never in the and maybe this was by design. They never in the documentary mentioned that the Janelle Grant lawsuit does include WWE as a company. It's not just Vince and Johnny Ace.
Right.
It's Vince, Laurinaitis, and WWE named in it. They never say that in the documentary. It's just Vince is, implicated. Vince is under investigation. So that may have been a very specific, purposeful edit that they made there. But I don't know. I mean, 6 hours of it. It's like, I'm curious to hear from people who aren't us, who aren't wrestling fans, that even look at this thing, over the weekend. Is what I'm really curious.
I was going to say, who's the audience then? Even amongst wrestling fans, who would be the audience for this? Would it be people in our age bracket? Would it be people who just love the drama, and then they'll be steadily disappointed because there's not much juice to the squeeze as you're describing? So who is this for? Besides Vince's ego?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, in some ways, it does work as like a kind of a really broad historical thumbnail of his entire time with the company. So because it covers so much ground. And honestly, that's what I would say, once I knew that that's all it was going to be, that there was going to be anything juicy, because I watched the beginning and I watched the end. In a lot of ways, I could have been like, skip the middle of it. Who cares? Now I know what they're going for. But I still watched the rest of them. And it mainly became because they did dig out like a lot of like random cool historical, footage that just was like, oh damn, where'd they get this? There was a lot of like stuff from over the years of like, different news programs, things would be on, and just random stuff that surfaced in this. They did a lot of damn research. So for me personally, the archival footage was kind of like the star of the thing. So even if you're like, you're a hardcore wrestling fan, there's some gems in there that are kind of like, well, that's kind of cool. But at the same time, I swear I would say for a hardcore fan, it's like, you don't need to rush to see this thing, especially with it being on Netflix. It ain't going anywhere. But it's like, I don't know.
So let me ask you this then.
Yeah.
Let's say that Vince is working on his memoir, right?
Okay.
And it's him and his ghostwriter, but it's it's his story. It's the memoir. Is there anything that he would directly contradict in this story? Because it doesn't seem like they're breaking any new ground. Right. Maybe they're filling in a couple of the pieces that you may not remember, because it seems that the timeline for this is, maybe the 70s when he takes things over from his father. And then they flash forward until 2000. And then they flash forward, then they go through that bit of business, and they flash forward again 20 years to today. So is there anything that Vince would go like, okay, this is absolutely unequivocally untrue, ... And
I'm sure there'd be tons of like these versions of these scandals where he'd be like, no, this is my version of what happened. And you get that in here for the most part. And that's where people are like, well, they didn't push back on any of that. They they presented something, he got to have his say, and then that was it. Regardless of what, facts may be known about stuff.
Right.
So, and whether that was done in the interest of, time, the Lord knows, 6 hours of this thing. I mean, if they wanted to go into much more detail, they could, but you'd be stretching this into like 7, 8, 10 episodes if they really kept like expanding on it. And I guess that's another thing. Like I said, they had more interviews scheduled with him. He was supposed to do one more round of interviews when all the drama started. So if those interviews had happened, this thing might look a little different in some ways. Of course, yeah, then we would have that whole extra part tacked on the end. But I don't know. My takeaway, having watched it now, is kind of, I don't hate it as much as somebody was like, oh God, it was horrible. Total waste of time. I'm like, no, it has some strengths to it. I like the historical stuff in it. But at the same time, I think you have a section of folks that really had their hopes up that this was going to be like the Vince McMahon gotcha, him getting nailed to the wall for all this stuff he did all over the years. It's like, well, why would he cooperate with something like that? You got, that's if it was going to be something like that, he wouldn't have been involved in it. So I'm not sure where people got that expectation in their head. It's like, oh, this is going to be, we're going to tie him to a stake and light him on fire. And this is going to be the end of his legacy. And it's like, that's never what this was going to be. So in some ways, I think it's remarkable that they got all the different scandals from over the years in there to begin with on something that he agreed to sit down and be involved. So in some ways, it's remarkable in that respect.
Sense that when this was conceived, this was meant to be a big deal, and midway through production, Vince was like, this ain't going the way I really want it to go, and wanted to pull the ripcord. I wonder if it was too late to pull the ripcord at that point to just say, yo, can we scrap the project? So
yeah. I mean, seeing this thing went over years, I wouldn't be surprised. It started. I think that's part of the deal. That it probably started with a general idea. We're going to do this, and then as time went on, it became, hell, all this damn crap happened. Hell, the company got sold. Something we thought would never happen. The guy got, isn't in power anymore. Something we never thought would be imaginable, short of him retiring. So, yeah, I mean, I think considering it just kind of is what it is. So, I don't know. That's my thoughts on it. It's interesting. I don't think it's by any means horrible, but it's I don't want to say it's a victim of the circumstances of what it is, but it is what it is. Yeah, it is what it is. It's a very unique docuseries. It's a very unique docuseries. And at this point, I think the biggest thing I'm curious to hear is people coming up. And hell, this is the same thing I think I went through with the Iron Claw. Once it was done, I was like, I want to talk to some folks that don't know nothing about this, who happen to watch it. Because that's the perspective I'm curious about. And those are probably gonna be the people who are gonna be like, oh my God, this madman, hearing about all this damn crazy stuff Vince has done over the years. So I'm curious if those folks will actually dig through 6 hours of this, just because the dominoes keep falling of crazy, ridiculous scandal after crazy, ridiculous scandal. So I don't know. Anything else you want to ask me about? That's my thoughts on it.
It just seems like a shock piece, like it was meant to be shock and awe, and it just, for maybe the non-wrestling fan who just heard about WWE, let's say that. But aside from that, this just seems like a look at me piece and look how crazy I am because I'm an old man. But yes, Vince is important in the wrestling world. We know that, and it is important to not pay homage, but to at least notice what he's done because of the WWF, WWE. But from how you're describing this, I was interested when you started talking about it. Well, now I don't give two rats behinds, because the fact that you said it's stretched to get to 6 hours, right? Like, even though we had all this footage, 6 might have been 8 if they could have fit some stuff in. It just seems like it's not worth my time. I got other ways to spend 6 hours.
My recommendation would be watch the first one and get at least a taste of it. Get a taste for how they put it together, because it just the production is what I would say. Yeah. And then from there you can decide, if you want to jump around and like I did. I was like, hell, let me jump to the end and see how the end of it is. Then Anyway, I don't know. Anything else?
Yeah. So I guess the one question is, to your point, Damien, I do believe that what they had originally and what they tried to end with, because I'm looking at the episode notes, and it starts off and it goes and it, kind of bullet points of his life, because how do you eulogize, a 70-year-old that's been in the business for 50 years.
Yeah.
You know, you can't do that in 6 episodes. Okay, so 2 questions. First one, do you think that this would have been better as a serial in that, like, maybe 10 episodes a season? The first season would be the golden era, then you move into you know, the attitude era, then you move into ruthless aggression, then you move into whatever the hell was after that, I guess 2010, 12, you know, whatever, to where we are now.
PG era.
Yeah, right.
PG era. Right.
Yeah. So because all of those different things had very important points in it that changed wrestling. They had to adapt with entertainment, and then now you know, they started the WWE network when Netflix was handing out DVDs. So there are some of those things, but is that a McMahon thing or is that a WWE thing? So, and so that leads to the second question is, do they actually differentiate between Grandpa Vince, the, you know, taxpayer from Connecticut, and Mr. No Chance in Hell, you know, largest grapefruits in the East, Vince McMahon, the boss, the chairman, the CEO, that's going to inject poison into the NWO?
There is an interesting part in the 5th episode, because the last one I watched. There's an interesting part where they really get into the family dynamics. Where they really get into stuff. They get Stephanie in there, and they get Shane in there, and Linda's in it too. And they kind of talk about the difference of Vince, you know, and from their perspective, they have the difference of Vince as your boss, Vince as Mr. McMahon as a character, and then Vince as your father. And the difference of, like, that 3-headed, I guess, snake of what that can be. And, you know, it's an ongoing theme in this is, you know, is Mr. McMahon and Vince McMahon the same person? Or are they different? And he keeps saying, no, I'm nothing like that. And resoundingly throughout the thing, people will be like, there's no difference at all. He's just as crazy as the character is. The character is an extension of himself, many of them say.
So what evidence do they give that he's not like that? I mean, do they show Thanksgiving photos or him building snowmen with Shane and Stephanie?
There is some family photo movies in there. It's kind of you definitely get some of you know, Stephanie and Shane growing up, and you get anecdotes from them about growing up. But honestly, that was one of the most interesting parts of it. That was stuff that, you know, a lot of us never got to see before. So that was a very interesting segment. And if anything, I would like to see more of that. That would have been dig further into that. But again, it was probably totally dependent on how much were they willing to give of that, you know, peek behind the curtain of, like, the family life of that, you know, as a family, as opposed to the wrestling side. So I don't know. That's in the 5th episode. That's a really that's actually
no. I mean, really like, fair enough. You could go into that, and then at the same time, the Rita, what's her face, Chatterton.
That's in there. Yeah. That's the whole.
You know, I mean, that would have to be in there, but that's like a huge juxtaposition because you have his alleged rape, and she went on TV and said it, and then you have, you know, him being a doting father and stuff like that, and you know, and then like COVID would be a huge thing that I would be interested in. How the hell did he manage that? The Thunderdome down in Tropicana Field.
And they don't do much about the
AEW.
Thunderdome.
Huh?
They don't do much about the Thunderdome or COVID era. That is an era that they kind of skip over.
Right. So, like, if you're talking about, like, how does a man, so that's kind of the thing, I guess. Like, what is the point of this? Are we trying to are we just going to, like, beat the points that we know where, like, oh, he's evil and this is what absolute power looks like and this is why it's bad? Or if it's just like, no, this is what you need to do to be a CEO, regardless, the ends justify the means and whatever. I know everybody's trying to put a spin or an agenda on it, but it really is kind of like, again, who is this for? It's not saucy enough for the hardcore wrestling fans that want all the dirty details. It's not maybe interested enough to see some rich guy born into a business, started at the top and kept it there and elevated the ceiling, sure, but it's not exactly like a pull yourself up for your bootstraps type of a story.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't know if I want to see, you know, a billionaire become a trillionaire, or a millionaire become a billionaire, you know?
Exactly. When you start on third base by buying the New York territory, it's, you know, you're not starting from scratch, no matter how much you tried to spin it. It is what it is.
Right.
All right. Well, folks, it dropped this week. I'm sure people will be watching it this weekend. if you got thoughts on it, tell us, on the social media at Big Gold Belt. Because hell, a lot of people will be watching it over the weekend, I'm sure, since it just came out, and Lord knows it's a bit of a time commitment, but it's worth at least checking out the first episode. I think that, and then from there, hey, if you want to watch more of it, you watch more of it. You don't. It's they do a good job of breaking up the episodes as far as like different time periods of the company over the 6 episodes. So enough about that. Enough about Mr. McMahon. We will do this. Let's do this. We will take our halftime now. Let's take halftime, come back. We will have our indie spotlight, and then we will switch gears to talk about AEW Grand Slam. Since that was in New York last night, got to talk about Nigel and Bryan and all the other assorted action that went down up there. And then we got the CW premiere next week of NXT, and that's been cooking for a while. So lots of stuff happening in wrestling, folks. Thanks for being with us here tonight. Stay with us. Your Big Gold Belt Wrestling Podcast. We'll be back right after this.
A little birdie told me, everybody, that you may be interested in doing some sponsorship and advertising opportunities with us here at Big Gold Belt Media. You know what? You might as well, because we are the golden standard for all of your media needs. Why would you want to go anywhere else? Besides, all of your pre-roll ads, your mid-roll ads, as well as your on-air reads are going to be done by me, Damian G. Yeah, professional broadcaster, Damian G. We do all types of social media promotions. That means your podcast, your IG, your Facebook, your Twitter, and your business website all get shouted out on our network here at Big Gold Belt Media, where we cover wrestling, movies, comics, and more. And you can find out more information and make those inquiries, kids, because, limited time offer here at Big Gold Belt Group at gmail.com. Again, that is Big Gold Belt Group at gmail.com. Why would you want to go anywhere else? I wouldn't. Well, I work here, but I still wouldn't even if I didn't. So again, Big Gold Belt Media for all your sponsorship and advertising opportunities, your podcast, your IG, your Facebook, your Twitter, all of your social media platforms, as well as any business website you want us to promote on our show. Big Gold Belt Group at gmail.com, and let them know Damon G sent you.
Thanks for staying with us here tonight on the Big Gold Belt Wrestling Podcast. When we come back from halftime, we like to check out what's happening on the indie scene. So here's Giant Crab with this week's Big Gold Belt Wrestling Podcast Indie Wrestling Spotlight.
And this week we are going to beautiful Grand Prairie, Texas.
Oh,
and we're going to
down Damien's way.
Yeah,
I know
we're
where
going to be
that
out
is.
there.
Yeah.
So that's Pro Wrestling Revolver. They're having a show in Grand Prairie, Texas at the Epic. And that is Epic over Texas. It's October 12th at the Epic in Grand Prairie. The Epic is 2960 Epic Place in Grand Prairie. You head out there. It's right off of the toll road, in between Arlington and Western Dallas. So not terribly far from DFW, but right in the middle of everything. But you have Pro Wrestling Revolver, like the company. They do good work out west, and they're bringing a lot of their friends with them. It's Moose. Ace Austin's going to be out there. He's the Revolver World Champion. Mike Bailey and Veda Scott, because you can't have one without the other. Sammy Callahan, Ali Cadgeford, Vixen, and Exodus Prime, and more. So I'm interested to see what the matchups looks like. I'm interested to see how the card breaks down, of course. But the meet and greet starts at 6. The doors open at 7, and the show starts at 8 on Saturday, October 12th, at the Epic in Grand Prairie, Texas. It's Wrestling Revolvers, Epic over Texas, and you can get tickets at prowrestlingrevolver.com/events or out at the Epic in Grand Prairie, and that's the Indie Spotlight for this week.
Awesome. Like to hear just big indie shows happening as we head into the fall. All right, so enough about documentaries, docuseries. We can get back to actual wrestling now and not retrospectives of stuff. So last night, AEW Grand Slam up in New York, of course, at Arthur Ashe Stadium, where they've had it every year since the inception. Quite a big curtain they had up last night, and the stage was definitely pretty tight. I want you guys to get in here because I did so much talking in the first half. So I only saw the opener. Bryan and Nigel was what I was interested in on that show. And then the rest of it, I was like, whatever, And I'm glad they opened with that so I could get that out of the way. It was presented commercial free, and I thought that was cool. My biggest takeaway when that show came on is I was like, this looks like any other one of their damn weekly shows. It did not look like it was in a stadium at all. It did not look like how that stadium has looked in the past. I guess just because they had to like compact it so much with it being a smaller crowd in there. But from the jump, I was like, this looks like a regular episode of Dynamite. It didn't look bigger. It didn't have that grand slam look that it did before, where it clearly looked like a bigger thing. That said, Brian and Nigel opened, like I said, commercial free. They went about 17 minutes or so.
About 15, 17 minutes. Yeah.
1850 saying here.
Not bad.
I thought to myself as I was watching it, I was like, it felt like a good tribute to the past matches they've had, to like their series of stuff that they did in the past. By no means was I blown away, but also by no means was I let down. I looked at it as a tribute match. And I thought it was cool. I love that Nigel got to have that. It's kind of like a send off for him. And by the time it was done, I was like, all right, that was cool. I'm glad Nigel got to have that moment. I'm glad they got to do it as like a tribute to all their ROH stuff. And thought from there, I'm like, okay. From the beginning, I've been like, I hope that's the extent of what Nigel's doing with this. And got to send off and got to have a big moment in New York City for me. So that's my take on it. Damien, you get in here.
Yeah, no. While we were doing the show, obviously, I'll let them in behind the curtain. I was watching the highlights of Grand Slam, and I got to tell you, like what me and Crap talked about last week was the match I was looking forward to was that. And to be fair, that's what I called it. What it was going to be. It was going to be an ROH style tribute match, being that Nigel had wanted this for so long, and he got to do it in the Northeast, where back in the day, ROH ran with the Northeast. For the most part. And it was definitely a you still got it match, but not to the point of he needs to make a full-time comeback. With that said, kudos to Brian for, I don't want to say carrying him, but at the very least, knowing Nigel's injury history, working a good enough technical match where it's not, how do I say this? It doesn't look overly safe, like when Bret Hart can't take a bump because of his concussions and strokes. It looked like an actual wrestling match. If I'm going to call it anything, I think it's a main event of WCW Worldwide, because we brought it up last week. So that was good. But the rest of the card and the rest of the highlights I was looking at, nothing stood out. Another thing that me and Crab talked about, it just seemed so regular. Just the card itself. It didn't have any shock value or this person might win the title. No, it's paint by numbers. And to your point about the set, Will, it reminds me, again, a battle of the belts where it used to be a big deal, and now it's just a thing. And Crab is going to probably talk more about it, but he said it needs to be put out of its misery after this one. And I fully agree that after seeing it and looking at the highlights and looking at the results, with nothing else standing out aside from, Plumber Moxley, according to Jim Cornette, getting that title shot against Brian. Okay, now what? And I think that, like you said, well, it was just a regular Dynamite. It didn't have to be. It could have been bigger, but that's what we got.
Yeah, and it was a good idea, great execution. I think that I applaud AEW for going out of the comfort zone, trying some things new, trying some things different. But as we discussed last week, so I'm not going to get like fully into that. Basically, this is something that they should have and then move on from its current format to something different now. And of course, they're going to do that because they're going from New York to London. Yep. And that's cool. Whatever that looks like. So the next Grand Slam isn't next year, a year from now. It's next couple of months, I think February or something like that. But even still, I believe that this should be a pay-per-view because Nigel versus Brian, going 19 minutes on TV uninterrupted is a pay-per-view match. But if you have Hook versus Roderick Strong, the Bucks versus Fletcher and Ospreay, Mariah May versus Yuka, and John Moxley versus Darby Allin, these, and they went damn near 20 minutes, so these are things that could be given enough time where, they don't have to cram this into 2 hours. And that was just the show, the Dynamite show. And of course, the Collision show will be airing Saturday. No spoilers here, but that happened afterwards. Yeah, that's a pay-per-view. So if you add up all of the matches that happened between the two shows, you had 5 matches on Dynamite and 8 matches on Collision in 4 hours. That's a pay-per-view.
Yes, it is.
So
late night for a Wednesday.
Right. So I hope they do that going forward. I'm glad to have been to the first 2. And because it's rare that you get to know that history is going to happen and you have an opportunity to be there. But they had it cool. Retiring the FTW title was a cute little wrinkle, especially in New York. And then the debut of MVP is a choice, but okay. I have to see where that goes. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't grand, but it was definitely an above average and inflated Dynamite or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I think that it was a good time. Now again, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't have shows at Ash. I mean, hell, if anything, Ash could be what the Garden is for WWE or what Hammerstein Ballroom is for WWE. So I absolutely don't mind having a show there as a part of their regular touring schedule, especially, and again, going back to last week, we don't know what the shockwave is going to be and how that's going to fit into the fold and anything like that. But yeah, absolutely. Run Ash and Prudential Center and UBS and make it a 3-week tri-state deal in New York. And then go up to Bridgeport or something. Yeah, cool. You can absolutely do all of that. But as far as this show goes, I was at the baseball game on Wednesday. So because this didn't feel like it was the Grand Slam, but I do believe that I will go back and watch Bryan versus Nigel, and probably watch in full Mariah May versus Yuka Sakazaki. But it happened exactly the way we predicted it. This wasn't exactly something that you were going to go, other than the actual surprises. But as far as the matches goes, which is the only thing they advertised, it was. Yeah, it was what it was, and that's fine too. So on to London. Good on them.
A beefed up TV show episode.
Right.
What we got.
I mean, it's like the Sunday Night Heat before pay-per-view.
Good way to say that.
In some ways, I definitely want to see the Mariah May match. I got to pull that up tomorrow and see what's up with that one. But yeah, the rest of the show, I was not sweating at all. As soon as I saw Bryan and Nigel was on first, I was like, thank you. thank you. So I can get that out of the way and then move on to other stuff. So from here, they're on the road to Wrestle Dream, I guess, in a couple weeks. And but that second week of October, they'll go out to Seattle for that whole deal with Bryan. Well, now it's going to be Bryan and Moxley as the match out there. We thought it'd be Bryan and Swerve, but guess it ain't going to be, or Bryan and Darby, we kept thinking. This would be the Pacific Northwest, but they're not going either route on that. So I'm not sure what to think of that card yet. Looking at it was just like what it's turned out to be when we were coming out of that last show. We were coming out of All Out. We were at all these ideas. It's got to be Bryan versus Swerve, or it's got to be Bryan versus Darby. And no.
Yeah. But to be fair, we were thinking of the hometown crowd. We were thinking of Seattle, the Pacific Northwest. And we weren't thinking of, and at least I'll admit that I wasn't thinking of the fact that, Bryan and Moxley came up in WWE together, and that whole thing, and I'm sure has to play into some kind of part as well. So yeah, I could see that it may not be the technical precision match that I want to see per se, right. But then because we just came off of Nigel versus Bryan, a dream match for a lot of people. Never thought we'd see it again, and here we are. So now that we got that out of your system, you get the other thing. You get Moxley versus Bryan at the pay-per-view, which, especially if Moxley's a heel, does he retire Bryan in his home state, near his hometown? Does that make him the heel that AEW wants him to be? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know I don't know how well that gets conveyed. But obviously, moving on from Bryan is the move, especially if he's saying that he's not long for the company. But it is kind of like they've done everything they needed to do. They've split the faction. They've removed Bryan from the Black Bull Combat Club. Mm-hmm. Yuta's a babyface. Okay, cool. you have your blow off match because I totally forgot that Moxley choked him out with like a shopping bag or something like that. That happened at the last pay-per-view. So yeah, that's the storyline that they've been telling from since that moment. And now that Moxley gets to retire Bryan and move on and elevate his heel status. I mean, it makes sense on paper. Not exactly what I want to see, but
right.
Yeah. But it makes sense on paper.
Okay, and also with that group, I got to ask a question, and maybe y'all could tell me, what's Marina Shafir's role in all this?
Enforcer.
China of this generation, it seems. Bodyguard, assassin.
So she's the bodyguard, the psycho bodyguard. Okay. Because every time I see her on screen, I see like the stagehands or the security, just get flung by her. I'm like, are you trying to make her Ronda Rousey the first run? Like that kind of aura. So
maybe
no, but to Crash point, okay, about Moxley. Yes, we're gonna get this blow off match, and probably I think that is the right thing for Moxley to retire Bryan. But going forward from that, we're gonna have this. We have this stable that we still don't know their intention, right? We don't know. They're just here to mess stuff up so far.
Yeah, their intention is pain.
Yeah. Chaos, exactly. Sounds a lot like Retribution, but I don't see the quick end game, and maybe long-term storytelling will tell us what this is. But I've lost interest in this new faction. Adding Pac and taking out Wheeler. Okay, I get it. That's you as a babyface, like Crab said. But I said it last week, I'll say it again. I feel like, in my opinion, even though they're getting reasonable numbers, AEW's treading water, at least to me. And it's okay. But if at least it's Shane McMahon, I'm out for like at least a month. If this is all to bring in Shane McMahon, to be the mystery benefactor of Moxley and company, or we get the Hurt Business with now they take Shane Strickland and make him part of their own version of the Hurt Business, with Bobby and Nana. We've jumped the shark. I feel like we've jumped the shark. This is the Fonz on the water skis for me. And I don't know if they can pull me back in as a wrestling fan. Well, I know we got cussed out last week because I said that.
But yeah, you said that, not me.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this though. Just as a heel goes,
yeah,
because we're old enough and we remember the heels of the 80s and 90s. Yeah. The guys and ladies that made your blood boil, that made you physically lash out, that made you want to jump the rail or throw shit at the ring. And I think in today's society, there's really no room for that.
Right.
Because you're not going to get an Iron Sheik or a Volkov or hell, even Bret Hart, as the heel that you hated, or even the cocky early Shawn Michaels as the guy that had a really punchable face.
Yes.
I don't know if there's room for that today, because what would that look like? And B, how do you do it without pissing everybody off? Because now, once you do that, everybody goes to the internet and just starts complaining and downvoting and everything that they do.
Mm-hmm. Right. And
you can't have, there's no space for a Mr. McMahon type, all powerful, sleazy CEO. There's no room for a Paulie Dangerously to come through and just like, or Cyrus the Virus to come through and just wreck shit and leave. So when we talk about a lot of these matches, especially since AEW was founded as like the wrestlers wrestling company, it's really hard for me to take a mega uber heel in a giant cape or something living under a volcano seriously, because they all look like Brian Cage to me. Partly because of, yes, I am old enough to remember the actual heels, the colognes and stuff like that, where you go like, somebody got to get stabbed. That's how this is the only way to get in. Somebody getting stabbed in the parking lot. There's no way this ends any other way. But now, like, who's the biggest heel? Who's the biggest heel in wrestling? Like, just not even AEW. Like, seriously, who is the biggest heel?
That's a good question. Now that we're thinking,
it's not Roman right now. because
No,
he's
no,
a
no,
friend of my
Gunther?
enemy type of thing. Who?
Gunther?
I mean,
yeah, but Gunther's
Gunther,
respected.
is Gunther a heel though?
The biggest problem. Gunther may be supposed to be a bad guy, but he's respected for his ability, so people don't really hate him. You know,
Like, if
there's been
Steve
a
Austin-
flashback for
if
years,
Steve
like the idea
Austin
of like,
was
cool heels. You
Yeah,
know,
right.
it's like,
like Shane Strickland.
yeah,
You know,
We didn't know what he
heel-
was for a couple weeks.
Right. Right. Because remember, in their match, that people, you know, that elevated Strickland, he was the heel in that match. And people were like, no,
yeah,
not anymore. Go get
yeah.
him. So I think
it's tough.
Exactly. So I think just in general, and you know, you guys can chime in out there and correct me if I'm wrong, but is there anybody that makes you feel on television? Because going to a show is something different. Because if you ever see like a guy like Schlack in real life, you go like, all right, yeah, so he needs to get stabbed. You know, but don't stab people behind the parking lot of a wrestling show. Not condoning that, but I'm just saying, if I understand,
It happens.
Yeah, it happens. I understand. With that said, though, I think that's kind of like the plight that their AEW's and WWE to a certain extent are suffering from, like the thing that Marvel has a problem with, that DC has a problem with. They don't have a heel that makes me hate. They have a heel that makes me inconvenienced.
Yeah,
that's a great term. That's
and one of the
actually
problems
really
is that the heels they do have that make you hate are just people that folks are sick of seeing, that they just don't want around. A Jericho, a Saraya that people complain about. They're sick of seeing them, and I think they're trying to spin it as like, oh well, that's heat. It's like, no, people just don't want to see them. They just don't want them on the show anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difference to get, you know, your Saraya or Sammy Guevara is another one.
Yeah,
that would make you just go like, ugh, never.
They're
again.
channel changers as opposed to like, yeah.
Exactly. So the Xbox key, as the kids would call it, you know, way back when.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the thing. Like, I don't know if there's any, especially in today's climate where they're in the middle of negotiating a new television deal. They've already been chastised for their language and content. You know, AEW has recently by TV. And it's just like, well, I know that a lot of this stuff, especially as we're talking about, the whole point of this is talking about Bryan and Moxley and why that is a thing. And I even still in that, I'm not convinced that this would make Moxley the heel that they want him to be or that they envision, because I think it's hard to hit that mark nowadays for anybody. My personal seething hatred of everything that Jon Moxley does aside, I just think that it's really, really, really hard to be a legit heel in wrestling on TV today. And I think that the only person that can actually do it, because Jericho's not a heel, Saraya's not a heel, people just don't like them. That's different. I think that when we get Tony Khan versus Shane McMahon on TV, and I'm not saying that's going to happen, but if we get that on TV, then you'll see what a heel is.
A McMahon, it'll take a McMahon in AEW, is what you're saying?
I think that's what I'm saying.
I think Shane comes in as the face and people turn on Khan.
Oh, we gonna have a Mr. Khan character?
I think so. I mean, I know that he's actually said that, no, I would never do anything like that. You know, whatever. But the internet, the only reason why he hasn't been just absolutely fricasseed is because of his limited time on camera.
Right.
But every time he does something, I don't care what it is. When he was at the draft, he had the neck brace on, you know, playing kayfabe. People
still love that, by the way.
Right. You know, people want, what is he doing? And then you have other, you know, things that he's done, or the fact that he's too excited about AEW and about how it's the greatest thing ever, or the way he handled CM Punk, or the way he had an MJF, or the fact that he allows Jericho to be there. You know, there's a lot of things. The paywall of honor for me is the thing that really gets me. But I think you gotta you gotta give me something that's a little bit more meat on it than just Marina Shafir being tough.
Yeah.
Grr.
Where's it needs depth. It needs some spice. It needs some depth.
Right.
We got a few minutes left. So let's switch gears to next week. Since our other big thing that's been coming down the pike is finally going to happen. So next Tuesday, The CW premiere of NXT, the USA Network era, is over. We've been waiting for this. We've been speculating about this. Here's what we know going into next Tuesday, real quick. So, of course, this will be in Chicago. This will be outside the Performance Center. First week, Chicago. Second week will be in St. Louis. Ethan Page versus Trick Williams with CM Punk as special referee. Roxanne Perez versus Julia for the women's championship. And we had Stephanie Vaquer show up this week saying she's waiting in the wings. So possibly a live appearance there. Chicago street fight between Wesley and Zachary Wentz. An appearance by Bianca Belair and Jade Cargill with the women's tag titles. The Miz hosts Miz TV with Oba Femi and Tony D'Angelo. And Jada Parker and Lola Vice versus two members of Fatal Influence. Quite a mix of stuff there. And then who knows? I imagine there's got to be some surprises up their sleeves for some extra spice of some sort. But we've been waiting for this show. This show, I think, is going to be practically this. We talk about, a show that feels like a pay-per-view.
Yes.
NXT CW next Tuesday, practically a pay-per-view, I would say, in my opinion. I don't know. Thoughts on what we got. What was that?
Yeah, definitely a takeover level event, especially since they're bringing in some main roster guys and, a lot of high interest matches. So, yeah, definitely started off the way they need to for series 1, episode 1, first time ever on the CW. You got to cast the widest net you can. And other than having Roman Reigns showed up, that you got to do that. I like it.
I'm excited. I've been keeping up with NXT for a while. I mentioned, on the show last week and in previous episodes how, you have these well-established veterans that are helping the kids, walk through their paces to get them. Because, this is still developmental, people. People forget that. This is still a developmental show to try to get them ready for the WWE experience outside of NXT. I like where they're going with this. I said it last week. This is the most watchable version of NXT that I've seen since the Black and Gold era for two different reasons. Number one, the Black and Gold era was AEW Light before AEW existed. Now we have promising superstars, we'll use the term superstars, that are being groomed to be the next wave. And it's kind of refreshing, even though I don't like some of the characters, that everybody has a storyline going into this. There's no just thrown together stuff. Like there's nuance to some of these stories, like with Tony D'Angelo, after his loss to Obafemi, now he's afraid. They pulled out the whole Rocky montage speech of like, I'm afraid, and you got Cedric Alexander randomly showing up now being Uncle Seti. They gave him something to do. With this potential love thing with Carmen Petrovic. It's a lot of good stuff. And then we got Ethan Page, 17 years in the game, finally getting the spotlight on him. He's already been made the main champion of the men's division and the face of the franchise right now. They're in good shape, man. And I'm excited for them. And I just hope it doesn't bomb. And the biggest thing I hope that doesn't bomb is Roxanne versus Julia. Because I have heard and seen, all about Julia for years. And a lot of people online, I'm not one of them, but a lot of people online are not impressed by her at all so far. So I feel like I feel as if they have to really go all out in this match, even though Roxanne could have been main roster ready a long time ago. I hope this is a passing of the torch. I hope Roxanne drops the title and then we get this new wave of women's wrestlers coming up, but I'm excited. I'm just worried that there's certain parts that are going to bomb with the audience because we're attracting a new audience on the CW. This isn't the USA Network. We're going to get new people. They might say, what the hell is this? Where's John Cena? like some people would say back in the day, but I'm excited. But I got one toe in the pool just in case.
The biggest thing for me is going to be the rating. I think having it in Chicago, more importantly at the Allstate Arena in Rosemont, but at the Allstate Arena is going to be key, especially for those that really care about the fans' participation. Not only is this not some theater or small venue, some intimate setting. This is where they have pay-per-views, other television events for WWE in the Chicago area. So they're going to have 14,000 people in there going nuts for NXT. And we haven't seen that since a takeover. So, that's going to elevate the mood a bit. And then, of course, with the show itself being what it is, that's going to elevate the mood a bit. So I hope that for those that care about the crowd, I think the crowd is smart enough to appreciate the card from top to bottom versus having it in some, pig factory in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. They're having it in one of, the Madison Square Garden of the Midwest for WWE. And that's the Rosemont Horizon, the Allstate Arena. So I think that they've definitely hedging all of their bets. CM Punk has been on NXT recently. They're going to be in Chicago. I'm not saying he has to be there, but it wouldn't surprise me if he was. It's just a lot of little things that they're doing to set it up. They're definitely laying the groundwork to put their best foot forward. The only thing that we don't know is, what will the ratings look like? Will people be able to find the CW on their television channels, cable, satellite, whatever, the apps and all that good stuff? Are people going to be able to adjust to that fact, because the ratings for TV versus the ratings for cable are not the same thing? So what's a good number for the CW? What's a good number for WWE? And then you cut that in half, because we're talking about NXT and not the main roster. So I think this is probably going to be the toughest test, even tougher than Netflix, because at least with the main roster, you know what you're getting. The CW show is kind of like college football on a channel that you've never seen before. The roster is going to change. It's going to change repeatedly. It's going to change early and often. Yeah. The show is on the CW. What else do they have there that would drive in a WWE fan? They're making the issue to bring in more sports, but other than that, they show Law and Order reruns. So it'll be interesting to see what's going to happen. We already know that they're going to be preempted on election night on Tuesday for CW politics coverage. Who knew that CW had a news division? But it looks like this is the partnership that WWE was looking for. It won't be the audience, obviously, of Fox, because it doesn't have the weight and the presence of Fox, but it will be exactly what WWE needs for NXT, which is a mutually beneficial situation where everyone gets elevated. NXT is on over-the-air television. CW gets X number of 100,000 viable viewers every week. Everybody wins if they watch.
There you go. Next Tuesday, it's going to be an interesting one. It's going to be a very interesting show, I think. We'll definitely be talking about it next week to see just how they do this. Their premiere on network television, where they go from there. And the week after, they're in St. Louis. They had to downsize the building there, and Randy Orton's going to be on that one. So they're bringing in the big guns. They're laying the groundwork, and I guess the week after that, it sounds like they'll be back at the Performance Center. So they're doing these first two shows on the road. So they're definitely they're trying to make this a big deal. I would imagine on Raw on Monday, and God, probably even SmackDown on Friday, they're going to be hammering that show happening. They're going to be getting that word out about CW Tuesday night, NXT. Get ready. You're going to be hearing a lot of that, I think, for the next couple of shows till we get there. So there we go. Okay. We filled this hour, no problem. It was a busy night of stuff. Anything else y'all want to throw in before I wrap things up?
Okay, so real quick, register now for SummerSlam tickets. That's August 2nd and 3rd, Saturday, August 2nd, Sunday, August 3rd. Both times are 7 p.m. at MetLife Stadium in North Jersey. I like that they're doing the 2-day deal. I've always said the SummerSlam should be an outdoor show and a stadium show. Having it August 2nd, and it may not be the worst thing, because it's either going to be pretty damn hot and sticky or fairly nice, that time of year in North Jersey versus Philly, which is going to be cold for WrestleMania. Yeah. Also, more importantly than that, the Mets are playing at Citi Field versus San Francisco. So I'll be damned if I don't make a very concerted effort to go up there to see the Mets before I take the train across the river to MetLife. So SummerSlam and at MetLife next year. Interesting. And that, of course, precedes SummerSlam 2026, which is going to be at the home of the Vikings in Minneapolis.
There you go.
So
Stuff is happening. They're locking these big shows in early.
Yeah.
They're definitely locking them in early.
Planned now.
Yes. Yes. They dropped that news today. Had Cardi B herself put the word out. So where that means there'll be some involvement from her, but they are sparing no expense on making these shows a big deal. That is
absolutely.
For sure. All right, folks. We did it. Thursday nights, 8 p.m. Your Big Gold Belt Wrestling Podcast is here each and every week. We're glad you tuned in with us here tonight. We'll be back next week talking about NXT, talking about AEW, talking about WWE, whatever's going on. We will not be talking. Well, maybe we will be talking about the McMahon documentary because people are going to be watching it this weekend. So I'm curious about, like you're saying, I want to hear what folks have to say about that documentary if they took it out this weekend. So maybe we will have a little bit more about that, a little more follow up on it as more people start to see it. Other than that, let's see. Let me run down all the stuff here. So on social media, it's at Big Gold Belt across the board to find us, whether it's Twitter, X, Instagram, all that good stuff. We stream each and every Thursday night, 8 p.m. As you found us here tonight, the podcast form lives on all your favorite podcast platforms thereafter. So if you want the audio version, that is available too. Of course, on the web, you can find us at biggoldbelt.com. Wrestling, movies, comics, and more. Whatever's happening in entertainment, Big Gold Belt Media has you covered. So, folks, Thursday next week, we will be here. We'll talk about NXT. We'll talk about what's going on in wrestling. We may talk about the documentary. Watch some stuff this weekend. There's a lot of darn stuff to choose from, a lot of shows happening. So you got your work cut out for you. There's no shortage of wrestling going on. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next week. See you then.
A little